I'm going to let go of my Tom Barraza bitterness and move on to number 66. It's Kiki Kyler, is a guy we've talked about
Hey.
on the show before. Played for the Pirates between 1921 and 1927. Is a Hall of Fame right fielder. Consistently hit over 300. Finished second in the NL MVP voting in 1925, the year that the Pirates won the World Series, and he did a lot to help them do that, as Steve detailed in a previous episode, as I detailed also in a
He
previous
he
episode.
he hit a single in the there was a double in the ninth inning or eighth inning that may or may not have been fair.
Right, right, and he had a massive beef with his manager, Donnie
Yeah.
Bush. Donnie Bush was the guy that Kiki Kyler he kept trying to get him to do something. I forget what it was.
Yeah.
The way he threw guys, didn't hit the cutoff man or something. And Kiki Kyler's like, well, if you don't like it, get somebody else. And Donnie Bush is like, okay, I'll just bench you for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Even though we're playing the New York Yankees in the World Series, I'm going to stick to my guns and keep you on the bench, even though all the fans are booing me. So,
yeah, that's right. In the 1927 Yankees, I don't know. Was that team any good?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It certainly didn't need an extra bat there to go against Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and company. But anyway, very good player. Number 65, we mentioned him earlier, Bobby Bonilla. Played for the Pirates.
See, you didn't say it right. You got to say Bobby Bonilla.
Okay.
Remember the announcer when he used to come up the bat at Three River Stadium? So I don't know why he always said his name. He's like Bobby Bonilla.
I do not remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Bobby Bo played for the Pirates between 1986 and 1991. He was kind of the first big free agent to leave that team, and that was a big deal when he left. He was a four-time All-Star. He was a great power hitter, 114 home runs, 500 RBIs, could hit for average too. Kind of really bad at third base when he started his career, but they moved him to the outfield, and he was much better there. Bobby Bo, definitely a really good player. Steve, any good memories of Bobby Bo?
I remember I went to a Pirates clinic one time and Bobby Bonilla was there and he threw me a pop-up, which I missed because I suck at baseball. But
well, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Bobby Bonilla was embarrassed for me, but not too embarrassed because guess what? Every July he still gets $1 million from the Mets.
He does.
So good for him.
Here's an interesting story nobody will remember. When the Pirates were down 3-1 in the 1992 NLCS, Barry Bonds was apparently really, really distraught because that had been 2.5 years where the Pirates just weren't producing and he wasn't producing in the NLCS. And he calls Bobby Bonilla, and Bobby Bonilla actually flies into Pittsburgh to kind of counsel Barry Bonds in the middle of that series. And he's when Bobby Bonilla was playing for the Mets. And, try to pick up his spirits and tell him, you're a great player, just keep pushing forward. And then the Pirates ended up, as we know, coming back all the way to the bottom of the ninth inning of Game 7. And Bonds actually started hitting during that time. So it's not like, Bobby Bonilla's pep talk necessarily turned all that around, but again, just like Drabek, if the Pirates go to the World Series that year, I wonder if we remember that story more. Because there was no reason. He played for another team. He had no reason to fly into Pittsburgh to help his old team, and he did that. I think that's something that no one will ever remember.
What a mixed bag too. Remember, didn't he challenge a reporter in New York to a fight?
Yeah.
So,
he
had his ups and downs and whatever. Good for the Mets. I hope the Mets new owner appreciates signing that check every year.
Well, and we
could only, I someday I hope to sign a Bobby Bonilla deal like that. That would just, could you imagine just, and I think he still has another 8 years on that. Like if you literally just, you could keep doing something else. Like if you can't live off $1 million every year, what are you doing? I mean,
he really fleeced that, but what can you do? All right, number 64 is Dermonte Dawson, center for the Steelers between 1998 and 2000. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was a 7-time Pro Bowler, and I would argue the best at his position in that era. Those 90 Steelers teams who had Jerome Bettis and Barry Foster and Bam Morris and those great running games, they don't have that without Dermonte Dawson. The other thing he could do really well was he could pull. I don't know that I've ever seen a center pull before like he could. And there's a play, again, one of these things nobody will remember, but they're playing Denver in the AFC Championship game in '97.
I remember, yeah, and he runs like 20 yards downfield and blocks somebody.
Yeah, he Cordell Stewart, early in that game, Cordell Stewart has like a 30-yard touchdown run on a bootleg. And Dermontti Dawson gets out in front of him. He literally takes out two different guys for Denver with the same block. And that's why the Steelers get the first touchdown of that game. Again, no one remembers it because the Steelers lost, but that was the kind of player he was, just a freakish athlete, really good player, Hall of Famer. So Dermontti Dawson, number 64. Number 63 is Ray Matthews. Played for the Steelers between 1951 and 1959. He played running back and receiver. He scores 39 career touchdowns, which in the 50s playing on the Steelers, is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Some really, really bad teams. He's in the Steelers Hall of Honor. Again, a guy that none of us can ever say we watch play, probably not a lot of highlight film for, but obviously a really great player on some bad teams. Steve, any thoughts on Ray Matthews?
I don't know Ray Matthews or anybody who saw Ray Matthews play, so sure, why not?
We got to give him his due anyway.
Yeah.
Number 62, we just talked about this guy recently too on our Pitt Hall of Famer episode. It's Joe Schmidt. Played for Pitt, was a linebacker between 1950 and 1952, has his number retired for Pitt, and then became a famous singer.
Yeah, him and Dick LeBeau and somebody else on the Lions defense of that era. He's considered the prototypical Mike linebacker. He basically invented the middle linebacker position in the NFL, and he was small, and he didn't do a lot at Pitt because he got hurt a lot, and I don't think the coaches liked him back then, but he had a great NFL career, much better NFL career in Detroit than he did with Pitt.
So Joe Schmidt, number 62. Mm-hmm. Number 61 is Rocky Bleier. Played for the Steelers between 1968 and 1980. Certainly a key piece of those 1970s teams with Franco Harris in that backfield. Won 4 Super Bowls, averaged 4.2 yards per carry, and is in the Steelers Hall of Honor. Definitely in the shadow of Franco Harris, Steve, but important player nonetheless.
I had that and you have a nice picture here. We can see it on the podcast of he caught a really awesome pass against the Cowboys right before the half. And plus a decorated war veteran, Purple Heart. I don't know if he got any other awards. And generally amazing story how his foot was messed up and he came back. And the benefit for him was he got Robert Urich to play him in his biography movie. So
that's right.
We couldn't do any. I mean, I guess some of our younger people, it'd be like if you got who's like a dreamboat actor these days. I don't know, Ryan Gosling. It'd be like if Ryan Gosling played me in a movie. I'd definitely be lucking out there.
Yeah, you can't beat when Spencer for Hire plays you in a movie.
Yeah,
that's the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Number 60 is Doc Ellis. Doc Ellis was a Pirates pitcher between 68 and 75. Also came back briefly during the 79 season, although was not a member of the World Series team. Doc Ellis probably best known for a no-hitter he threw in 1970 while tripping on acid. But if you take that away, he also won double-digit games every year between 1969 and 1974. So again, one of those guys that, maybe not very heralded, or maybe heralded for, one thing that maybe he, some people wouldn't like to remember, but was a pretty solid pitcher.
Yeah. And I don't think did he become a drug and alcohol counselor later in life?
Yes, he did.
So
yeah, great story. There's a great documentary on Amazon about him. I think it's on Amazon. About it's about that no hitter, but it's really about his life and his life after that. A pretty amazing story. Number 59 is Andy Russell. Played for the Steelers between 1963 and 1976. Made 7 Pro Bowls. Was the team MVP in 71. Is in the Steelers Hall of Honor. And it's one of those guys where if he comes into the league, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years later, we have him way higher than 59. Like he's at the end of his career when the Steelers win those first two Super Bowls, and
He,
he's still
he's
great.
yeah, he's one of the few players that lasted from the pre-Chuck Noll
Yes,
teams.
yes, because he was
Yeah,
that good.
yeah.
I mean, Chuck Noll basically. What was the thing that Chuck Noll said his
He
first
said
training camp?
most of you aren't going to make it or something
That's
like
right,
that. Like
right.
we're going to get a winning football team or something like that. And most of you aren't going to be
And
on
he
it.
meant it.
Yeah.
But Andy Russell was one of them. So, yeah, Andy Russell, great player, great linebacker. Again,
Good
if
for
he's
him, like pay the payoff too, like sticking around through the crap till the
yes,
really good years. So
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And again, if he starts his career at the same time as Joe Green or Jack Lambert or any of those other guys, like he's way higher than 59 for sure. All right, number 58 is pretty much we'll just take everything we just said about Andy Russell and apply it
yeah,
here. It's Ray Mansfield, played for the Steelers between 1964 and 1976. Uh, those he was their center, and he really those first two Super Bowls the Steelers won were very run heavy. I mean, they did not have much of a passing game at that point, and the league rules hadn't shifted yet to allow for a better passing game. So they won those first two Super Bowls on the back of their running game, and he was the anchor of that. He still holds the team record for 182 consecutive games. He's in the Steelers Hall of Honor. The Steelers had just like literally three great centers in a row from like the time Mansfield started to the time Dermontti Dawson retired. And again, just like Andy Russell, he comes along a few years later and he's way higher on the list, Steve, I think.
yeah. Another glad to see another guy where it paid off. It's probably really the only two players from those teams that made it.
Yeah, Mansfield, I saw an interview with him once. He passed away quite a while ago, but I saw an interview before he died where he said that uh, before Chuck Noll came, he said Andy Russell and him used to they would always just wait for the bottom to drop out on the season. Even if they felt like, oh, we're having a good first couple of weeks or whatever, they just knew that eventually it was just going to all go south. And he said that those two guys that we just talked about, Mansfield and Russell, they could just feel the change when Chuck Noll and those new batch of players come in. They didn't feel responsible for all the years of losing. They were like,
Yeah.
whatever. Who cares
They
what this
didn't.
team did before
Yeah,
this?
they didn't know any better. It's like
Right.
they're too young to know any better. Yeah, which is
Right.
sometimes a good thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, and it certainly wasn't that case. All right. Number 57 is Joey Porter, JPZ, Steeler linebacker between 1999 and 2006. Three-time Pro Bowler, all-decade team of the 2000s. Stats are not going to be the reason you have Joey Porter on this list. Like Joey Porter was so much more than stats. We did a whole episode on Joey Porter as well. The way he could get inside people's heads, the way he totally psyched out the tight end for the Seahawks, who dropped a bunch of passes in the Super Bowl. His attitude, his flair, his intimidation factor, like you just can't quantify Joey Porter's value to the team, Steve.
No, you really can't, I guess. And like you said, he was a good player too. He was really a good player, and give him credit for his on-field stuff. And he had a lot of key sacks in big games too. That Colts game, that divisional Colt game,
Yeah,
he had a great game against Peyton Manning in that offensive line.
he also holds the distinction of the only Steeler player that can say that they won us a playoff game 10 years after he left the team.
Hey, that's true.
Number 56 is Donnie Shell. Just like the all-time most underrated player maybe in Steeler history.
He's the Carnell Lake of the 70s.
He is. He really is. And he finally was recently acknowledged and inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was an undrafted free agent in 1974, played for the Steelers all the way to 1987, has 51 career interceptions, made 5 Pro Bowls, but he played on this defense again with way bigger stars and was just kind of a guy that was solid in there and made plays and didn't get the necessarily the same amount of accolades that those other guys did. So I feel very comfortable putting him this high on the list. Steve, what do you think?
He's a Hall of Famer, so that says something. And I did not get to see him play, but I've heard stories. And I think OJ say like he used to still feel his hip from when Donnie Shell hit him one time. So that says something, right?
Yeah, there we posted a clip on our Facebook and Twitter site a little while ago where he crushed Earl Campbell once, made Earl Campbell fumble, and then Earl
Yeah.
Campbell did never got up. And Earl Campbell was not a guy you could hit.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the guy was a monster.
Yeah.
So to get a lick on Earl Campbell, first of all, you had to have a lot of guts just to even try to hit him. Because there's clips of him, like there's a guy for the Rams.
Yeah, he just runs him over.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
just destroys them, destroys them. And so even to like say, okay, I'm going to try to hit Earl Campbell took a lot of courage. And then to actually get a good clean hit on him. Yeah, Donnie Shell was a pretty special player. Another pretty special player is Curtis Martin. Played for the Pitt Panthers from 1991 to 1994. Was a running back, ran for over 2,600 yards. And Steve and I have talked about Curtis Martin before because the Pitt teams of that era were so bad. I can't describe how bad those Pitt teams were. I really can't. They were just awful, awful teams. And he was the only good thing on them. And I don't know how he could do anything because if you played against Pitt, they had no quarterback, they had no offense, they had no good game plan. Literally you could put 12 guys or 12. You could put 11 guys in the box.
If we're in Canada,
or 12 guys 12. If they would have let you. But you could put 11 guys in the box and just leave the receivers uncovered because it didn't matter. You know, if you could just stop Curtis Martin, people still couldn't stop Curtis Martin. He was just absolutely dominant. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, he was like a tweener. He was big enough to run over the little guys and fast enough to run away from the big guys, and that kind of carried him for his whole career. He just, I think, too, like it took him a couple of years to mature into the player he would become, and that definitely happened under Bill Parcells, and he's become probably a better human being in person than he ever was a football player, and that's saying something.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
Good point.
A special player, one of my favorite Pitt players of all time. He said, I mean, there's just games I remember where Pitt did nothing. I still that 28-0 game against Boston College where the highlight of Pitt's offense that game was an 80-yard Curtis Martin run called back on a hold.
Right. That's kind of the story of his career.
Yeah, like my dad sat in the rain and watched that monstrosity.
He had very few highlights. One of the ones, again, we posted this on Facebook and Twitter. Please subscribe on our social media sites if you haven't already. Plug. But we posted a clip of there was a game they were playing at the Vet, the old Veterans Stadium, against Temple. And Temple was kind of like the other team in the Big East that was just garbage. So that was like our one winnable game every year.
Yeah.
And Temple had just scored to make it a close game, and Pitt needed to run out the clock or have to punt back to Temple. And they handed it to Curtis Martin from their own, I think it was from their own 20. And this was the very end of the game. He had rushed a whole bunch of times. He was probably exhausted. And he cuts to the outside and he outruns the entire Temple defense after a whole day of running hard for an 80-yard touchdown. And that was just him. He just lifted the entire team on his shoulders. I think that, again, stats and all that just don't do him justice because you had to have watched those teams and realized how truly putrid they were to recognize how
I remember
how dominant he was.
I was at the game at Texas, and they don't have that. Somebody has the first half on YouTube, but they don't have the whole game. But Pitt ended up losing on like a late 2-point conversion or something they didn't get. And I think Curtis Martin had 250 yards rushing.
Yes.
It was amazing.
Yep.
And the officiating was bad too. They were definitely sided toward Texas. Because I remember Johnny Majors after that game saying on the radio, well, the refs earned their Texas T today. Nice. Good job, Johnny. But
all right, number 54 is we're going to go back to Pirates pitchers who had good careers, but really are on this list because of what they did in championship moments. And I don't think anybody defines that as well as Steve Blass. He played for the Pirates between 1964 and 1974. He was certainly the consistent ace of that era of those teams, but really it's the 71 World Series, right? The Pirates don't win that World Series without Steve Blass.
Absolutely. He pitched a gem, a shutout, I think. Yeah. And it was him and Clemente really in that game 7 that won it. And it's a shame because like it's another guy like you wonder if he wouldn't have been the best pitcher in Pirate history if he just wouldn't have lost his confidence or his fastball or I don't know what happened to Steve Blas. You wonder like if he had that now like with all the, like the sports psychology and the medicine,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe they would have been able to he would have been able to had a more successful or long career. But
yeah.
I mean,
That's
I guess he was in the league 10 years, so but a lot of those he was like at the end there, he couldn't throw a strike. He just like
right.
for after that for years, he just couldn't throw a strike.
Yeah, yeah. We have a at number 54. I think if they don't win the 71 World Series, he's way lower, maybe not even on the list.
Right.
But then conversely, like you said, if he kind of gets his stuff together and pitches for another 6 or 7 years, maybe he's on the 79 team because he still could have
Yeah.
easily been playing at that point. Then we have him way higher on the list.
Yeah.
So definitely a guy that could have gone either way, but we'll keep him at 54. And also want to mention, obviously, he was an announcer for the Pirates for 37 seasons. We're not counting that towards the his ranking, but certainly he was
fun. He was entertaining.
He was. So yes. Got to acknowledge that as well. Number 53 is a teammate of Steve Blass. It's Dave Parker, the Cobra. Played for the Pirates between 1973 and 83, four-time All-Star, 1978 National League MVP, three-time Gold Glove winner. There's some great highlights you can go watch on YouTube. I think there's one specifically from an All-Star game where he gunned somebody down.
From the middle right field.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so Dave Parker was a great player. We talked about him in our episode we did about the drug trials because we mentioned in that episode that there was a book that was published in the early 80s, and it was called the 100, it was just like we're doing now. It was the 100 greatest baseball players of all time. And they had Dave Parker on that list. Like literally, this is Babe Ruth and it just all the Ty Cobb and all, he's in the 100 greatest ball players of all time in the early 80s. And then he has a lot of problems with cocaine addiction. And that really ruins his career with the Pirates. He does actually come back and have a strong end to his career in Cincinnati, but that's the reason he's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I still maintain to this day because of that. So another guy that, gosh, Steve, could be so much higher. Like he could be like Clemente Stargell territory if he wasn't on drugs.
Yeah, if he didn't take that dip in the middle of his career, he'd probably have 400, 500 home runs.
Yes,
probably.
And he probably plays for the Pirates for all those years too, right? He
I think he hit for average too. So
he did.
Yeah.
So kind of a shame what happened with him, but still a great player. Somebody I posted something on our Facebook site, and somebody posted a comment that said, I watched him play and I always thought he was better than Clemente, which I thought was a pretty bold take. But again, I that's how great Dave Parker was, right? That there's fans out there that actually said, I could actually say, that I thought he was even better than Roberto Clemente. It just, he didn't have the longevity to keep it going because of that addiction, unfortunately. Number 52 is another guy that fell into some problems with addiction. It's Kevin Stevens, Penguins winger between 1987 and 1995. And then came back in 2001 and 2002 for a second stint in Pittsburgh. He was a two-time 40-goal scorer, a two-time 50-goal scorer, instrumental, absolutely, to the two Stanley Cup teams of the early 90s, arguably their second best player behind, their center, the guy we'll talk about later. And again, just like Dave Parker, right? Now this one was a little different because what really triggered a lot of this was Game 7 of the 93 playoff series against the Islanders. We talked about that in our episode we did a little while ago about the three great Pittsburgh teams that didn't win championships. He collides with Richie Pylons and he lands on his face, just a gruesome, brutal, horrific injury. And he starts taking painkillers, and that leads to a pretty significant addiction that I think he ends up in jail at one point. Steve, is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
And it just really derails his career, unfortunately. Otherwise, we have him way higher on this list.
Absolutely.
So unfortunate, but don't want to forget again, two-time 50-goal scorer, two-time 40-goal scorer. That's beyond impressive.
Yeah, he was very good with those Penguin teams of the 90s. Key piece. He was right wing, right? Yeah. So
Yes,
playing on the line with Mario, though, that's always helpful. But
it is helpful for sure. But I don't think that anybody else. A lot of people played online with Mario, and I don't know that they scored 40
that's
goals
true.
four different times. So number 51 is Ralph Kiner. Played for the Pirates between 1946 and 1953. He's a Baseball Hall of Famer. He was a six-time All-Star. Really, the Pirates' first star home run hitter. You know, you had like the dead ball era of baseball, and then this guy that we've mentioned a couple of times named Babe Ruth comes along, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, home runs, that just gets you all the runs at one time. You know, to play
Yeah.
small ball and move the guy over. So that becomes a big deal in baseball. And of course, fans of that era, just like fans of this era, love the guys that can hit the long ball. And that's Ralph Kiner is really the first Pirate player that's a star home run hitter. He hit over 40 home runs 5 times. Famously, was it Branch Rickey, Steve?
Yes.
Branch
Yes.
Rickey is the general manager of the Pirates. He makes a famous quote. Ralph Kiner, I think, wants more money, and Branch Rickey says, "Well, we finished in last place with you. We can finish in last place without you." And he's unceremoniously traded to the Cubs. So his Pirates career not as long as it could have been. Maybe he's higher on this list if it was.
Yeah, I think he does he have over 500 home runs?
For his career, yes, not with the
Yeah.
Pirates.
Well, no, yeah, for his career.
Yeah.
So another one of those great pirate hitters. And
Yep.
I only remember him from watching when they used to have WOR on the cable, and they used to have like Mets games, and the post game was Kiner's Corner.
Oh,
So
that's right. That's
yeah.
right.
And
Wow.
that's the only thing I remember Ralph Kiner from was he would do the post game of Mets games in the 80s.
I
And
remember that.
like today, Daryl Strawberry had 3 home runs. It's like, okay.
Good memory. Forgot about that. All right, we're halfway through the list, and number 50 on the list is L.C. Greenwood, Steelers defensive end from 1969 to 1981. Just like Dwight White, part of that famed Steel Curtain line, 6 times in the Pro Bowl, 78 unofficial sacks. They didn't track sacks until 1982 after L.C. Greenwood retired.
Sucks to be him.
Yeah, I mean that was good for. I know T.J. Watt just recently broke the record was like 82 or something for the Steelers. So he was right up there in terms of career sacks, but again, it doesn't
Did
count.
that count? So
No,
that didn't count
it
toward
didn't
TJ
count. It wasn't
Watts.
a stat until 1982.
Well, Deacon, yeah, because Deacon, what's his name? Deacon Jones said he kept track of his playbook, and he had
Yeah.
like 24, 25 one year or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but it did. Yeah, it was not an official stat until 1982. L.C. Greenwood is in the Steelers Hall of Honor. There is a pretty good case, I think. Obviously, we're biased. Pretty good case for why he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's not, probably because there's so many Steelers from that era in there already. That probably hurts him. Steve, L.C. Greenwood, what do you want to say about L.C. Greenwood?
Was he the guy with the gold shoes? Yes. No. I don't remember, but he's pretty awesome. He had a lot of sacks. Little once again before my time. I the 70s Steelers, like I was too young to know them, and then I really didn't get into football of the professional level until 1992. So, but looks like he was a good player. I've heard of him.
That counts for something.
Yeah.
All right, number 49 is a guy on the list that we will also say was before our time. Before our time.
I don't know about you, Tim. I sat in Forbes Field and watched him run for all kinds of yards.
It's John Henry Johnson, running back for the Steelers between 1960 and 1965.
I heard he was a steel driving man.
He's also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He made 3 Pro Bowls for the Steelers. Also, the first Steelers player ever to rush for more than 1,000 yards, and he did that twice. So kind of like Bobby Lane was the first superstar quarterback, John Henry Johnson was maybe the first superstar running back.
Was this the guy the chief paid a bunch of money for, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, you'll never get that money back"? Or was that
yeah, he was again. So we did a whole episode
on the Dark Ages. Yeah.
We did 2 episodes. We did an episode on the Dark Ages, and we did an episode about this specific era, the late 50s and early 60s, where the Steelers had a coach named Buddy Parker, and they decided, hey, we're going to go all in to kind of win a championship, right? You've seen teams do that today. That was not in vogue back then. but they were like, to hell with draft picks and developing rookies. We're going to go out, get veterans, and we're going to win now or bust. And John Henry Johnson was part of that. And like you said, Steve, about Bobby Lane, it wasn't like they just got a guy at the end of his career that couldn't contribute. He was very, very good on the Steelers.
Yeah.
It just didn't culminate in any championships.
Well, the fact that the Colts and Packers were kind of the gods of in Cleveland too. I mean, those are three really good teams that the Steelers
Eagles had a good team back then.
Yeah.
So it just didn't work out because of those other teams, and then also because Buddy Parker was completely insane. So, like I said, go back and check out that episode if you haven't already. I think we called it like when the Steelers went all in to win a championship. It's a pretty fascinating and forgotten era of Steeler football, but a pretty interesting one. Number 48 is Pie Traynor. We talked about him also. Steve did an episode about the Pirates 1925 World Series team, another very forgotten, great time in Pittsburgh sports history. So again, go listen to that episode. Pie Traynor was a key part of that team. He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He has a career 320 average. He has 2,400 career hits. Steve, what do you want to say about Pie Traynor?
What position was he? What position? Was he an outfielder?
He was an outfielder.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because one of the Wainers played third base. So, but yeah, very good with those guys. And hey, won a World Series in 25. So you can't take that away from Mr. His numbers retired by the Pirates too, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Yeah.
Yep. Number 47 on the list is a teammate of his. It's Lloyd Wainer, Little Poison.
Yeah, this is Little Poison. Okay.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, and he played for the Pirates between 1927 and 1945. Also in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Also has 2,400 career hits. Also has a high career average of 316. One thing about Lloyd Wainer that you could say was made him stick out was his speed. Really, really good speed guy. So yeah, Lloyd Wainer, very good player as well.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame they couldn't have had Kim and Kiki Kyler at the same time. They had a heck of a team in the National League. But
yeah. I mean, they made it that 1927 team will always be forgotten because 1927 Yankees. But as we detailed in that episode, it was a really, really good team that maybe if it hadn't been for all the internal turmoil that they had, could have actually potentially upset the Yankees. Number 46, Mike Ditka, was a Pitt tight end / defensive end between 1958 and 1960. He is in the College Football Hall of Fame for his contributions at Pitt. His jersey is retired by Pitt. Mike was a great athlete, also played baseball and basketball, also wrestled at Pitt, like on an intramural team.
Wasn't even wrestling Mike Ditka.
Yeah, I can imagine. That would be pretty rough. So we talked about Mike Ditka in our Pitt Hall of Famers episode. Obviously went on to a great NFL playing and coaching career. Very colorful character, Mike Ditka. But, before all that, he was just an all-time great player at Pitt.
What about the injuries, Tim? Ask the trainer.
Oh, yeah. Right.
What about the injuries?
Right. Ask the trainer. Next.
Yeah. Not fun, is it?
Yeah.
Mike had a lot of fun in his post conference.
He did. And I'll repeat what I said in that episode. I so badly miss that era of NFL coaches who were just completely unhinged. You just don't see that today, and it's sad.
Imagine if we could have like a league of like Buddy Parker, Mike Ditka, Buddy Ryan, Jim Mora.
Yeah,
just hiring the craziest. But Dennis Green. Oh, that Dennis Green only really melted.
Oh, he was pretty nuts. Sam White,
yeah,
Gary Glanville. Yeah. Even another guy that people won't remember as much. Jerry Burns was the coach of the Vikings back then. He had a press conference where he dropped, I think it was like 47 F-bombs in about 4 minutes.
Oh my God.
So you just stuff you would never, ever, ever see today because everybody's all image conscious. And those guys just would never get hired. You wouldn't have billion-dollar businesses, which is NFL franchises, hire a guy like that to run their team. But back then they did, and we all had a lot more fun.
Maybe the XFL will pick up on that. Yeah.
Maybe. Number 45 on the list is Connie Hawkins. Connie Hawkins played for the Pittsburgh Pipers of the ABA from 1967 to 1968. He led Pittsburgh to its only ever pro basketball championship, and he was the MVP of the league.
Why haven't we
the year
won a
he did
pro?
it.
We haven't won a pro basketball championship in a while. Why hasn't that happened, Tim?
Yeah, I don't
I
know. The we should really get it together with that.
it's I guess it's pretty tough to win one when you don't have a professional basketball team.
That is correct. But we did have a professional basketball team in 1968. Connie Hawkins was his best player, and again, this may be a little controversial to put him this high uh, because it was such a short time. But again, the contribution of that championship is something to be remembered. So Connie
He
Hawkins
had
made
to fight to get in the NBA too, didn't he?
he
Or
had to
no,
fight. Well, he had to fight just to get a contract somewhere because
because he
there was
got
a scandal.
accused of
Yeah,
gambling, which he didn't. So
right. There was a scandal in college where he probably had nothing to do with it, but his name was tarnished. And back then, he also was a black player, and probably that contributed to the
yeah,
like, well, I'm sure he was probably in with those guys anyway, kind of attitude that the NBA had. And so that's how he kind of made a name for himself, was going to play for this upstart ABA league and wins a championship and then launches a solid NBA career after that. Number 44 is Bill Fralick. Was an offensive lineman at Pitt from 1981 to 1984. Two-time consensus All-American, is also in the College Football Hall of Fame, like Mike Ditka. Offensive lineman, obviously, there's no stats, there's not a lot of glory, but you may have heard a term attributed to offensive line play. I call it a pancake block, where someone literally just the offensive lineman just totally runs over the defensive lineman or linebacker, whoever it is he's blocking. That phrase is actually credited back to Bill Fralick. Bill Fralick was the first guy that people saw do that. And that term, the pancake block, that entered the lexicon because of Bill Fralick.
that is awesome. I think he did the Pitt broadcast for a minute too, if I remember
I think
correctly.
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember now here's a good Bill Fralick moment. Was I don't know, it was a couple years ago. I think might have been I think Peterman was a quarterback. So it was like 2015, 2016. And they have Bill Fralick back. And I think he had stopped calling the games because his health started to fade a little. And he's on the sideline. And you've been to Pitt games, Tim, though. I've like, oh, back today is, I think they had Larry Fitzgerald back a couple weeks ago. But so Bill Fralick's on the sidelines and Pitt was up like 14-0. And for no good reason at all, Nathan Peterman fumbles the ball, and Virginia, they're playing the University of Virginia, returns the fumble for a touchdown, and it's 14-7. And they decide at that moment, after Virginia's kicked the extra point in between like the next kickoff, they're kicking back off the Pitt, to interview Bill Fralick. And Bill Fralick had his arms crossed with a look on his face like, I will murder you, poor sideline retorter person, because I am really pissed that we let Virginia back. Pitt ended up blowing them out, but he was not happy. But good for Bill Fralick. Felt like the rest of us at that moment, I guess.
Got to be honest. Yeah. Bill Fralick
Yeah.
actually no longer with us, passed away very sadly in his 50s. I think it was cancer.
I do believe, yeah.
Number 43 on the list, we had his little brothers, the only brothers on this list. It's Paul Wainer. Played for the Pirates between 1926 and 1940. He was Big Poison.
Yeah.
So Lloyd was Little Poison, Paul was Big Poison. Also in the Baseball Hall of Fame, MVP of the National League in 1927. There's not a whole lot of Pirates that can say they were National League MVPs. Paul Wainer is one of them. He won 4 batting titles and he has over 3,000 hits. I mean, it's just kind of one of those, the resume speaks for itself, even though none of us were around to see it.
Yeah, I've heard stories like he could like show people, like he was showing somebody how to hit like all kinds of crazy pitches. Like he could hit to all fields. He wasn't just a pull hitter, and he could hit like balls out of the strike zone, and he could hit them where he wanted. Like if he wanted to hit down the third base line, he could like contort his body and have a swing to where he could do it. It was like he was that good. So I guess that's how you become a 4-time batting champion. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he was a tactician of a hitter.
Yeah.
And really all the great hitters, whether it's Ted Williams or Tony Gwynn or anybody, they could all sit there and explain to you kind of there's an art and science behind it. And I think, like you said, Paul Wainer was one of those guys. Number 42, another offensive lineman for the University of Pittsburgh. It's Russ Grimm. played for Pitt between 1977 and 1980. Was just the heart and soul of the offensive line at Pitt. Great player, drafted into the NFL, had a great NFL career, had a great career as a Steelers coach, almost became the Steelers' third head coach since 1969. So highly respected, really good lineman at Pitt. Again, no stats, nothing to really say other than he was heralded, he was celebrated as a great blocker, and obviously remembered in Pitt history.
Hey, do you remember in the I think it was Super Bowl 40? I don't know, it was one of the NFL films thing, but it was like Ben threw that interception in the second half to Seattle. And like there's like a highlight of Russ Grimm on the sideline going, "No, Ben, no." It's like but great player for Pitt nonetheless, and a pretty good coach too. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, never did become an NFL head coach. I was always
no.
surprised at that. I always thought that was going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess after the Steelers thing, well, he was kind of like he went to Arizona and like they gave him like that co-head coach thing,
Right.
and it
With
just never,
Hunt. Yeah.
yeah, it just never worked out.
Yep. All right. Steve mentioned this guy earlier as his all-time greatest Pitt basketball player. And number 41 is DeJuan Blair. Played for Pitt between 2007 and 2009. In 2009, he scored 550 points, 432 rebounds, and led Pitt to the Elite Eight, which is, I believe, to this day, the furthest they've ever gotten in the tournament, or at least in the modern era of the tournament.
Yes.
He's the only consensus first-team All-American in the history of Pitt basketball. So, Steve, your argument about him being the greatest ever, I'd hard argue.
Yeah, and I wish he would have stayed a year longer because they beat Butler the next year with him. Butler would have had no answer for him, and they probably would have made the Final Four the next year, but such is life.
Yeah, and we just talked about several guys who we didn't have the opportunity to watch play. This is a guy we did have the opportunity to watch play, and
he had a little bit of an NBA career too with the Spurs. He wasn't terrible. He was an off the bench guy, but
yeah, he wasn't ever a superstar in the NBA, but he was certainly dominant at the college level for sure. And again, the stats are there, but then if you just watch him play, he was really, really good. Number 40 on the list is another guy we've talked about a couple of times, Fred Clark. Played for the Pirates and managed the Pirates between 1900 and 1915. Is also in the Baseball Hall of Fame, 312 career average, 2,600 hits, and was one of the instrumental players on the 1909 World Series team. Probably a guy that is remembered obviously as a manager, but he played. The guys didn't just manage back then; they were player managers, and he was a really good player, and really was instrumental in those early 20th century Pirates teams that they had that were really good.
I think he still has all-time wins for Pirates manager.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. Yep. And again, we're not counting coaches and managers, but his time as a player is enough to make him number.
Yeah, 312 average and 2,600 hits will do you.
Yes, for sure. And again, the Pirates were really good during that era. They won 4 pennants. So
World Series, I think, too.
And a World Series. Yep. Number 39 is Larry Murphy, Penguins defenseman between 1990 and 1995. He is also in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And, Larry Murphy, like some of the other guys we've talked about already, was one of those offensive defensemen. He would run point on the power play. And really, that's who the Penguins are. The Penguins, they've tried to remake themselves a couple times with very little success. And they just need to lean in. They did it, recently by signing Erik Karlsson. They're a team that's going to score. They're going to beat you with goals, and that's just who they are. And so they're
going to hang their goalie out to dry. So just emotionally prepare yourself.
Right,
the goalie.
Exactly. And they won 2 Stanley Cups playing that way in the early 90s, and Larry Murphy is a huge part of that.
I think as goalie for the Penguins, you just have to make the big save at the critical moment. And I think there's a person coming up on that list that kind of epitomizes that. Yeah,
there is. But Larry Murphy, again, Hall of Famer. Penguins don't win those 2 cups without Larry Murphy running point on the power play. And
I think he's probably their best point guy. If you had to put the Penguins' all-time greatest power play, I definitely put him at the point over Gonchar or whoever else they've had over the years.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they've had some
Yeah,
really good. I mean, they've
yeah,
had Gonchar Letang, Sergei Zubov, who's a Hall of
yeah.
Famer, right? They've had some really good guys in that position, but I agree. I'd put Murphy above all of them.
He was really good at keeping the puck when teams would try and clear it up the boards. He was really good at
Yeah,
keeping the puck in, and that's a big part of the power play. If you can keep the puck in the zone, they can't change and put fresh players on, and you keep the pressure on. Yeah, that was a big part of his game, and he had a really good slap shot. So
that's a great
yeah,
point. That's one of
yeah,
those things that would never show up on a stat sheet.
yeah.
How many times did he keep the puck in? That's not a stat, but it's
No, no.
important. Number 38 is John Stallworth, Steelers wide receiver between 1974 and 1987. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He is, even to this day, still third all time in team receiving yards, which is pretty impressive given the way that football has changed since he retired to be all passing. He's still third all time in receiving yards. And yeah, that last Super Bowl that the Steelers won, Super Bowl 14, he's a big hero in that game. John Stallworth, just a model of consistency. Some people would argue better wide receiver than Lynn Swan. I think Lynn Swan was flashier and had the career highlights. John Stallworth, maybe you could
Yeah, I
argue,
would.
was more
Oh, I would.
consistent.
I would agree with that. I think Stallworth's the better wide receiver. Although Lynn Swan was more of a big play guy. This guy was definitely. He wasn't all possession either. Like he beat like the whole Rams defense on that bomb by Bradshaw that put the game away. But another NFL Films moment where they rooted for the team that was playing the Steelers.
Number 37 on the list is another Steeler receiver, a guy named Antonio Brown. Played for the Steelers between 2010 and 2018. Caught 100 passes for 6 straight years, made 7 Pro Bowls. Uh, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Was one of the 3 most exciting Pittsburgh sports athletes I've ever watched. So fun to watch him play. And just a model citizen on and off the field. Great teammate.
Yeah.
Class guy all the way. Never had any problems. Will be remembered fondly for the rest of the time in Pittsburgh, Steve, correct?
He was all about the stats, not about winning championships. So that's why I ranked him at 73 because I'd rather give me Hines Ward, give me John Stallworth, give me Cedric Wilson. And you don't win championships with this guy. And the only Super Bowl he won was in spite of him, not because of him. He was a very limited contributor on that Tampa team that won the Super Bowl. Tom Brady won with way worse receivers than Antonio Brown, So he won that one Super Bowl basically with a lacrosse player playing wide receiver. So was that Chris Hogan?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm undervaluing him, but I'm sorry. It doesn't come down to he was all about getting his catches and his yards and okay, that's great. Good for you. I hope you make millions of dollars, and you did make millions of dollars, but
and then refuse to pay anybody for their services with those millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's like whatever, you do what you got to do, but you know what? If you want me to spend my fan time or my fan money, I want to see championships. That's what separate you in the whole goal. I don't think the players understand that is the way to separate. Your whole goal is to separate the fans from their money. And the way you do that is win championships, not, I guess not maybe with all the gambling and fantasy football stuff. I think that's why he's so highly rated because, hey, I won my fantasy football league because of Antonio Brown.
Yeah, it's totally fair. I can't disagree with anything you're saying. The Steelers did not win a title with him. He was arguably the best player, not just the best receiver in the league for a couple of years there. And the Steelers have a long history of wide receivers willing them to championships, whether it be Santonio Holmes or Hines Ward or John Stallworth or Lynn Swan. And Antonio Brown was never that guy. So totally fair. For me, and I had him ranked way higher than you, which is why he's 37. Again, he was just, when he was dominant, he was just so dominant. You could just throw to him. It'd be 2 minutes left in the game. The whole defense would know he's getting the ball, and he would still somehow get open. So to me, that's why I had him high on the list. But I can't, like I said, I can't disagree with anything you're saying. You're spot on. Number 36 is a guy that, again, not super remembered, but it's Max Carey. Played for the Pirates between 1910 and 1926. He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He has almost 2,700 career hits. He also led the National League 10 times in stolen bases, which, not a stat that gets a ton of glory, but that's a big deal, especially again in that era. It was small ball era, dead ball era.
Mm-hmm.
So, advancing guys on base is how you won games. You didn't have home run hitters.
Well, I mean, they were
bases.
starting. You could see they were starting to get into it. Like Ruth was starting to come in
at the end of his career. Yeah, at the end of Max Carey, but Max Carey's gone in 1926. So you're right. It's just kind of getting in vogue at that point. Most of his career is dead ball, small ball. So Steve, you had him higher than I did.
Yeah, I think he's and he had a cool name, Maximilian. But that wasn't. Yeah, he was a very good player for that 1925 team.
Yep. Number 35 is another guy that won a World Series with Pittsburgh. It's a guy named Bill Mazeroski, played second base between 1956 and 1972. He's also in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He was a 10-time All-Star. And really what he was known for was his fielding. He's an 8-time Gold Glove winner, arguably the best defensive second baseman to ever play the game. He also hit a home run that was kind of important, I guess. I haven't really heard much about it, but
yeah, that's it just happened actually as it was just yesterday as we're recording that.
That's right. Yeah, the anniversary.
And yeah, it was all it was a nice enough day yesterday. It wasn't raining, so people were out there at the wall.
Oh, listening to the broadcast.
Have you ever done? I've done.
I know you have. Yeah. So tell people what that is.
So every October 13th, they start, I think, at 1:00 because they time it up with the time the home run happened, which is like around, I think, 3 PM. And they play a radio rebroadcast of the 7th game of the 1960 World Series. And, it's fun to listen to. And they play old commercials too during the inning breaks. So it's fun. So it was a lot of fun to do. I'd at least do it once.
Yeah, Bill Mazeroski has a statue here. Bill Mazeroski's place in Pittsburgh history will just never, ever, I don't think, be forgotten. I think 200 years from now, people will still be hearing about Bill Mazeroski.
William Pitt, George Washington, Bill Mazeroski, Franco. Yeah.
I'm
surprised he doesn't have like one out at the airport with him and Franco and George Washington.
Right. Someday. Number 34 is Lynn Swann. Lynn Swann was a Steelers receiver from 1974 to 1982. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And, we talked about him versus John Stallworth. John Stallworth probably the more consistent receiver, probably the better, like, get open kind of receiver. But Lynn Swann's higher on this list because Lynn Swann had the clutch moments, the highlight reel catches. If you needed a big play in a Super Bowl or in a playoff game, and Lynn Swann was well covered, you could just throw it up and he would make an amazing catch, and he did. Again, it's one of those intangibles. Like if you look at stats, Lynn Swann's stats are nothing.
That's why it took him forever to get in the Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he has 300 some odd career receptions, which is like
it's not much.
Yeah. I think that Deontay Johnson so far in his career has just about this. I'm not kidding. Has just about the same number or more receptions than Lynn Swann. But it's all about what he did in big games and big moments. And that's what people always remember.
Absolutely good. And I think he ran USC there for a minute, I think, as AD, didn't he?
He had an interesting post.
He was an announcer. I think he was in The Water Boy.
He was in a couple movies. He was on the show Family Matters, if you remember. Remember that sitcom, The Urkel Show?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he wasn't playing Lynn Swann. He was playing like one of the somebody's boyfriend or husband or something. So Lynn Swann had a pretty interesting post-Steeler career. Someday I want to do an episode of like the like a life's work episode, right? Yeah. Like what people did after their careers, because I think there's a lot of interesting things that some Pittsburgh athletes did after their careers. But we'll save that for a different episode.
Yeah, and he was clutch. You are correct. He was very clutch.
For sure. Number 33 is TJ Watt. Played for the Steelers from 2017 to at least the time of this recording. He is the team's all-time leader in sacks. He was the 2021 Defensive Player of the Year. Just an absolute dominant force I mean, you watch him, he's just dominant. And the Steelers, I don't have it here in front of me.
Their record's really bad without him.
Their record, let's just say that. Their record is bad when TJ Watt is not playing.
Yeah. It's a shame. Now there's a guy like I think is kind of clutch, and I mean he does seem, but he hasn't won a playoff game yet. So, but I don't think I kind of like have the exact opposite. Like I don't think he's a stats guy. I think he's a football player and he wants to win games. It just, they haven't had a very good football team around him.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
He doesn't have the linebackers on the inside that Joey Porter or L.C. Greenwood or Dwight White had, or not Dwight White. He wasn't defensive lineman. But
well, he came the year his rookie year was the year that they lost Ryan Shazier, and I feel like it's taken them 6 or 7 years to rebuild from that injury.
Well, I don't think they have. I mean, I don't think.
Well, yeah, time will tell, I guess, right? Yeah, you can't say that they've definitively rebuilt. They've definitely had some moments in there, but there's still holes in that defense. But he's definitely not one of them. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. Number
32 is Hugh Green, played for the Pitt Panther football team between 1977 and 1980. He was a just to give you an idea how dominant Hugh Green was on the defensive side of the football. In 1980, he won the Walter Camp Award, Maxwell Award, the Lombardi Award, and he was the Sporting News Player of the Year, the UPI Player of the Year, and he finished second in the Heisman balloting, which is a big deal because the Heisman Trophy is not a defensive player award. It's really a quarterback award, sometimes a running back award. It's not an award they give to defensive linemen. Charles Woodson is the only other guy in the history of college football to have finished higher. He actually won the Heisman for a defensive player. And I think he also returned kicks and stuff. Otherwise, I don't think he probably wins it, Steve. Charles Woodson.
Yeah, that's that famous punt return against Ohio State where he does the Heisman pose at the end.
So yeah, Hugh Green was just an absolute dominant force at Pitt. There's a site called collegefootballnews.com. They actually named him the 5th greatest college football player of all time, not defender, not defensive lineman, player of all time. So that just tells you a little something about how good Hugh Green was.
Yeah, another guy I never saw play, but I've heard the stories, and yeah, he had an amazing career at Pitt, and part of that is dominant late 70s Pitt teams. So, and he's the baddest cat in the game, too, according to Sports Illustrated. So.
Number 31 on the list, Chuck Cooper, played basketball at Duquesne between 1946 and 1950. Still holds the school record 73 years later of 990 points. We told this story once on the podcast before, but the University of Tennessee actually forfeits a game in Pittsburgh because they wanted Chuck Cooper was an African-American player, and the University of Tennessee wanted Duquesne to sit him on the bench because they want to play against only white players, and Duquesne players and administration refused. Tennessee had to forfeit. He becomes the first black player selected in the NBA draft. And he plays for the Boston Celtics. The owner of the Boston Celtics is a guy named Walter Brown. He says, quote, "He could be striped, plaid, or polka dot. All I know is this kid can play basketball, and we want him on the Boston Celtics." So, I mean, really a revolutionary, not only a great player, but I mean, that's when that racism goes away. When you say, who cares what he looks like? Who cares what color his skin is? He's a great player. And he was the first guy it's hard to believe, right? The NBA, having a bunch of white guys, but that's the way it was until Chuck Cooper came along.
Well, when Havlicek stole the ball. Yeah. I think it was later.
Well, that was later, but you had Bill Russell and guys like that, at least by that point. But Chuck Cooper was a pioneer. If you go down and watch the Duquesne game on campus, the arena actually bears his name.